I'm gonna try to steal it. So I wanted to talk about Incarnation Cross as a great segue to what Peter was looking at about this. What is this Incarnation Cross? And if we look at the four gates of the personalities on Earth, we can see this is saying something about the frequency that we're here to express, the purpose of our frequency for being here, and the role that we're here to play through the profile. But that is the dependent variable. And so what we see when we look at the lifespan, and I think what the transit cycles and the concept of the cross getting to mature over the course of the life shows us, is what Ross said about how where we are and when we are and who we're with is actually the first order of business before we can get to that correct expression of purpose. Because if you're in the wrong place with the wrong people at the wrong time, your role, your frequency, and the costume that you're wearing is not going to make sense. And it's not going to be coherent to the people around you. So the nodes show us where the independent variable is. That's actually showing us that trajectory through time and space that's set for us. But before we even fully get here. And what's fascinating to me about that is that if you look at what we come in with the Incarnation Cross and the profile, I think that's how, when you see how that gets affected by these major transits that we go through, Saturn Return, Uranus Opposition, Kiron Return, you actually get to see that, yes, we come in with our organic nature, yes, we come in with this purpose and this frequency and this role to play, but it's immature. It's not fully developed. So it takes a really long time to get good at being ourselves. And I think for many reasons that I'll refer to in my chart, I've always been really fascinated in this question of timing. When I was 23 or so, I was living in Hawaii. I had run away to Hawaii after enduring undergrad engineering school for 4 years in Manhattan. I ran away to Hawaii. I had my first real astrology reading with a meditation teacher who became sort of like a father figure to me while I was there. And he looked at my chart, my astrology chart, and he was like, well, your stuff's kind of all over the place. So, and you got all this fire and air, so you're kind of like a flame in a billows. And, eventually it's all going to come together. And I'm 23 years old. I already felt like I was behind the ball. I already felt like I had chosen the wrong thing to study in school, and so I'm already behind where I should be. And I had this impatience and this urgency to do. And he was like, well, I think it'll probably settle out somewhere around 38 to 40. And at 23, I was like, are you kidding me? Like, you have just delivered me a death sentence. And he put his hand on my shoulder and he kind of rolled his eyes. He's like, I hate reading young people. And he was like, look, I'm 46 or whatever he was. He's like, I'm 46. I barely got my shit together. Just like, don't fucking worry about it. It's gonna be up. Just take your time. And the thing I said back to him right away, which you can see from open solar plexus, open sacral, open ego, was like, I got to figure out what I'm here to do, and I got to commit to it. And he was like, why don't you just try participating? Just try participating in life for a little while. Don't worry. So he was a great mentor to me and a great guide for me at that time. So that was sort of a shockwave, and my mind couldn't quite let go of this idea of, because I have a 6-24 and the 43-23. I'm the first line on the body side. I'm a 5-1, so I probably have the most arrogant mind of all of them. So my mind couldn't let go of like, I can crack this fucking thing. I'm not waiting until I'm 38. I'm gonna figure this thing out. Of course, he was right. When I had my first human design reading, which was about 2009, so I think we're kind of on a same timeline with that too. The woman I had a reading from, one of the main things that I remember that she said to me is, timing is really important to you, for you. And I think she was really talking about the 43-23. So she was saying timing is really important, and she really got across to me the sense that, oh right, I'm not here for everyone all the time. And I actually don't have the energy to try to get my message across to everyone all the time. And she really got it into me of timing is important. Choose your time well. And that tends to be the thing that I feel both with generators around this thing about like spend your energy well. And then also with projectors, like spend your attention well. You know, it's not infinite. And it has a consequence for you, for your body, for your health. So that was really a powerful message, and it kind of reoriented me, and I think it got me more willing to be in a place of just relax and observe. So it kind of introduced me into the potential of being able to sit in my own awareness for myself and to not have to get it to be recognized or use it to make a contribution or use it to prove that I know stuff, I know the answer, I can help you, I can fix you. And that was a really powerful invitation to be able to then sit back and say, well, I could sit in this room with all this stuff that's going on and all these different people, and I can just actually enjoy my own awareness. And then I really found when I did that, then I had a second reading about a month later with John Martin. And for any of you who are unclear, this is John Cole. This is not John Martin. If you ever saw them side by side in person, it would be very clear to you that these are not the same people. I had a reading with John Martin soon after. And he was talking to me and saying things to me, and I kept going, And he stopped and he said, if you say one more time, I'm going to reach this front and slap you in the face. I was like, okay. Let me just be quiet. He gave me a good piece of advice, which I've shared often for projectors, of saying, sit back, enjoy your own awareness, watch what's going on around you, study what you want. In the waiting process, let your attention go toward whatever you like. It's like if you're waiting, it doesn't mean that there's necessarily a problem. You don't need your authority to be screaming at you all the time so you know what to do every moment, every second. Just relax. Just relax, sit back, watch, and then when your attention starts to get really drawn towards something, just let yourself watch it. And if you're a healthy projector who knows how to do that well, you do that long enough, and somebody is going to come up to you and say, what are you looking at? You know something. What's going on over there? That's the contribution of energy that most projectors need to be able to then have that awareness serve a purpose. So we actually don't have, it's not very healthy for us to go in and insert, which we all know, but it's very hard to not do that as a projector. It's very hard to see as much as you see and not say anything. So anyway, that was a very big gift for me to get to learn to just sit back and enjoy my own awareness for myself. And over time, I actually started to feel very lucky to be what I was. In terms of human design, I think, who has a defined head in here? Yeah, so, hi. In terms of having a defined head in relation to learning a lot of these different systems, and especially with human design, I've really gotten to see over the years what a protection that was for me, especially given how open my body is, because my body's taking in and processing everything. I can look 17 different ways on 17 different days. I can take on all kinds of roles and things. But in terms of my mind and what I think about and what I take in terms of knowledge, my head is very fixed. So I can't get my head to be interested in things that it's not interested in. So if I don't give a shit about PHS, I'm not going to learn about PHS. If my head's not ready to take in my, some obscure detail of my chart, it's not going to take it in. In combination with the fact that I have a first line body, I think I could see very early on with human design, and especially because it came in after I had studied a bunch of other weirdo stuff, that I knew I can only focus on what I need to know moment by moment. You know, I can only take in what I can take in when the time is right. And that feedback that I got from some of those guides early on helped me to kind of accept that. There's a timing for you, there's a timing for your life, there's a timing for the unfolding of your purpose and your consciousness, there's a timing for the unfolding of your place in the world, and you don't have to push that. If you just stay present and pay attention, and admit when you know, and when you don't know, be honest with yourself. Or when you don't need to know. I don't need to know that right now. I actually can't process that right now. If you can be clear about that, then it's all gonna work out. So, at the same time, I can look at how many open head, my whole family is defined ajna, defined through projectors, my birth family. So, I didn't have a lot of experience with what it meant to have a broad mind. And to be around people who have open head, open ajna, I get to see, holy shit, you guys can think about so many fucking things. Like, I couldn't even imagine thinking about that. My head won't go there. My head has its questions, and it's very fixed. The other thing about timing that really struck me when I first found human design is John Martin also took a look at my husband's chart at the time, who's a 2-4 emotional manifesting generator with all the integration circuitry, lot of roots, several root channels. And I showed him my husband's chart, and I was like, how do I help this guy? He was like, there's only one thing to say to this guy. And I was like, what? He was like, slow the fuck down. I was like, oh. So the other feature of my chart that I think has really affected my interaction with this system is that I have a completely open solar plexus. I had emotional husband, emotional daughter. And so I've learned a lot about the importance of timing for emotional beings. I don't know if there's anything more important for an emotional authority than timing. So that really taught me through observing them. I really got to see when they do things outside of their own timing, even if it's what I wish they would do when I want them to do it, things get really messed up. It's not healthy for them. It doesn't feel good to me. Things get chaotic. And I think what I could start to see over time is that doing more faster, which is sort of like a gift of the manifesting generator of the 3420, what it's capable of doing, is not always the most efficient way to accomplish something. Because if the more faster is too fast, or if there's an emotional energy in combination with it, which is outside of its own timing, then you got more chaos, more mess, more stuff to clean up. So, and I think when we were talking the other day, and John and I have been in this conversation a lot about the emotional process. This way that Peter Schober said this as well, and just as an aside, if you haven't read Peter Schober's book on the centers, I think it's just one of the best things that's out there. But we were talking about this way that, and he said, sometimes with emotional authority, you can have a pretty quick sense of what resonates with you. Like you can sort of have, it's almost like that spirit awareness. So we're not quite there yet, but you can sort of have a sense of what resonates with you. You may even have a sense of clarity of knowing you're going to do something. But even that knowing or that sense doesn't mean that now's the right time. So it may be, I know I'm going to go to that thing. I know I'm going to do that thing. I know that's the next action, but I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready yet. And for me, it's been fascinating, completely open solar plexus, to watch how many emotional people I've seen in my life that I can see, you know you're going to do this thing. I know you're going to do this thing. Just waiting for you to get there. just let me know when you're ready. Or the opposite. Sometimes it can feel very clear to me, this is going to be a no, I know it's going to be a no. But we're going to do this dance of maybe, and I'm feeling it through, and I'm entertaining it. And so, okay, wait till you get to the right time, and then you'll be able to tell me no, when that's right for you. So I think in a combination with observing so much and being so affected by that emotional process, and with my open roots, seeing how detrimental it was to the emotional people in my life for me to try to hurry them up, especially because energetically I'd end up eating the effects of that. It's really taught me to respect timing, to respect right timing for things. In addition, I think if you have a lot of individual circuitry, and for me, all 4 of my nodes are in individual gates that are all part of the knowing stream right up the center. All of my channel definition is in the knowing stream from the head to the throat, and 3 out of 4 gates of my Incarnation Cross are in individual gates. So I'm all about the individual, and I think you'll see if you have individual definition in your design also that that's a way that timing is very important. Mutation isn't happening all the time. It's that sense of there's a pulse. So there's a moment when the mutation is here. There's a moment when you know something. There's a moment when the clarity has landed. And then it's going to be back to, I don't know, what's going on, where are we going, I'm still nervous, Then we're back to, which is most of the time. So I think that connection to individuality is also something that really highlights this sense that timing is very important. So, when we talk about the Incarnation Cross, Ra had this thing, this sort of formal thing, of saying, you shouldn't look at the Incarnation Cross until you've been in your experiment for 7 years, which, who's done that?
Yeah, well, I have looked at it.
Okay. Who has not looked at your Incarnation Cross until you've been in your experiment for 7 years?
Yeah.
We don't do that. We have too much, it's too much,
we love information though, don't we? We just bombard, but I don't need any of it out there.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. But I got to see an interview. I don't know if any of you have seen, if you look at Alcanon Diaz, if you look at his Your Own Authority website, he has this kind of intro video. Someone was interviewing him. And he says this great thing. It's one of my favorite things he's ever said. And he's been kind of a mentor for me. Somebody said to him, well, what's this deconditioning process been about for you, and what did you notice at this big magical 7-year demarcation in your deconditioning process? And he said, the first 7 years for me was really about mechanics. It's about the body graph. It's about I'm an emotional manifester. It's about I need to clear out my long history of historical entrenched, ingrained anger at many of the things that have happened in my life. And I need, is about getting straight with the mechanics of my design and how that impacts the people around me. But after that, as I got further into the process, it became about being an investigative martyr of consciousness, which is his Incarnation Cross. And if you listen to Ra's lectures on the Incarnation Cross, he'll say, if you're going to do a really good Incarnation Cross reading with somebody, you don't really need the body graph. It's not about the mechanics. It's not about the characteristics. And I think that's why we've seen things like Gene Keys and other iterations of human design come out and say, well, actually, you don't need the body graph at all. Just go straight to the Incarnation Cross and contemplate it and hang with it, and you're good, Personally, in my own experience, I think the characteristics are really important. And I don't see it as a dogma, but I understand why he said that, because I think there is a part of human design that's kind of like, it's an experiential kind of language. So if we get straight with our mechanics, if we get to the point where it's no longer about, is this a response, is this not a response, I'm a manifestor, but I want to be a projector, I'm a projector, but I want to be a generator, and we're no longer wrestling with the characteristics of our design. Once we get comfortable with that, and it just becomes automatic, I think part of what happens through the deconditioning process is we get to see it gets harder and harder to tolerate acting outside of your nature. It feels worse and worse very quickly. So then it starts to make it clear, oh, actually, this thing I used to do all the time, I can't do it for a second anymore. I just can't. Once that gets in place, I think that's where then the natural intelligence of the body, and also, for lack of a better word, the sort of cleanliness of our frequency starts to find its place. Then this is where trajectory, our movement through time and space, the things that resonate with us, the people that can see us, the places that we're drawn to, and the way we can follow the intelligence of the body and the inner authority to get to those places just becomes second nature. Then when that becomes second nature, all of a sudden, this role and this purpose and this expression of this cross that I'm here for, all of a sudden it's just happening. I mean, if I had tried to orchestrate, sitting here now to be a clarion giving you a message, I don't think it would have worked. So, thank you for the invitation, John.
What lands with me about what you say is in the terms of conscious and subconscious as they're known outside of human design, right? We know that the subconscious is what's actually driving everything that happens. So when I look at this and I hear what you're saying, we go to unconscious side and get aligned with the body, then now we're actually lining up with the thing that, consciously your conscious mind can't get it. So it's just that subconscious that's in control, you're now in harmony with it instead of bumping against it, but it was always running the show. So yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, the mechanics are always there, and they're always happening whether we know it or not. Whether we like it or not. We were just talking about 3955, for example, as a channel. We talk about 3955 as this channel of provocation. It can be intense. It can be really moody. It's got all this energy to it. But when I've talked to a lot of 3955s, they'll often say, "Well, I was just there and everybody started provoking me." People say, I notice that everywhere I go, everybody else starts being really provocative and moody and emotional and intense. And it's like, I don't feel that intense. This is just my normal life. I live with this shit day in, day out all the time. But I get around people who are, you get around people who are open there, they start amplifying your own characteristics. So you may be thinking, if you don't know this about yourself, if you have an unconscious 3955, you could be walking around places thinking, why does this keeps happening to me? These people keep getting really emotionally out of hand around me. Why does this keep happening to me? Oh shit, I'm the source of it. I fucking bring this shit everywhere I go. And everybody else is just acting it out.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes that can be a big benefit to understanding your own effect on the environment around you.
I think so.
So it's not only just about what you have and how you deal with that, but it's also getting to see that other people aren't as good at being what you are as you are. So then when an emotional person comes into the room and says, I think of gate 55, I associate it with a sense of fullness. Like when you read your poem, I was in tears. It was just like, oh my God, he just walked in and sat down and just filled this room with his spirit. Wow, that's beauty of 55. And by the same token, if somebody with that kind of energy can come in and say, I'm in a really bad mood today. There's nothing that makes me feel safer as an open solar plexus. And for an emotional person to just come in and say, this is how I feel. It's I know that's how you feel. I'm just glad you know that's how you feel. I feel safer when you know how I feel.
Exactly.
So yeah, I love the way that Alok said that when he just said, at some point, and I don't think it's necessarily at year 7, at some point, the characteristics aren't the issue, and it doesn't mean that they don't still have an effect, and it doesn't mean that they aren't still at play all the time in everything we do everywhere we go. But it's no longer an issue. It's no longer so much of an issue with ourselves. And then we're just like, huh, where am I going now? Huh, now I'm going over here. Yeah, now this is happening. Mm-hmm. Oh, now I'm in front of this room talking to these people. Huh, now, the thing starts to unfold, and then you start to find your place, you find your people. That costume that you're here to wear, in terms of that profile, that incarnation cross, starts to fit well. Mm-hmm. The places that you go, it starts to happen that the outfit that you're wearing makes sense in the place where you are. Mm-hmm. And then you can relax. And then you also don't have to be trying to wear this outfit and this outfit and this outfit, and this room likes that outfit and that room likes that outfit, and now I'm going to do this one. And it's just like, just relax. It's like, this is not my moment to shine. This is somebody else's moment to shine. Cool. I can watch you. Or nobody's asking me anything, so just watch. Watch and wait till somebody asks. So we come in with this incarnation cross, we come in with this profile, and then I think, in my view, I think what happens to most of us is we end up confronting all these conditioning forces. So whether it's the transits, it's mom and dad, it's society, it's all this stuff that's coming in. So the sense of the cross is there, the profile is always there, but the characteristics are working themselves out with the conditioned world that we're in. And we all inevitably get caught up in that to some extent or another. Then we get the first major life cycle. And to me, when the Saturn Return comes in, it's this moment, and I see each of these major cycles, to me, as almost like the universe is sending you reinforcements to say, hey, don't forget, you actually came here for a reason. It's not just about trying to win this fucked up game that somebody else created. You actually have your own game that you're here to play. So here's a few things. Here's a few boosters, reinforcements, people, other profiles, other themes. Here's a few things for you to play with to get your attention so that you see the difference between what am I here for, and what games have I got caught up in trying to win that are not actually healthy or appropriate for me. And sometimes I think when that first cycle comes in, it can kind of highlight that difference between the structures that have conditioned you and the structures that are actually healthy, the ways of being that are actually. Ross said the Saturn Return, if you do a Saturn Return reading with somebody, that it's best to do it a few years after the actual moment of the return. And it's best to be really optimistic in how you deliver it. Because I think a lot of us in our 20s, I don't know if you guys relate to this feeling, but I think a lot of us in our 20s feel like we're already behind. Most of us all our lives, we feel like, oh, I should be here by now, I should have gotten there by now, or why didn't I achieve this by now? So to be optimistic and supportive and say, hey, you're figuring out something for yourself that no one else has ever done before. You're a unique being. You've got this unique path to get to explore, and no one's ever done it before. So be kind to yourself. Be compassionate with yourself. These forces have come in, and they've shown you something, and that often, I think, can be a big chance for us to kind of get a booster on our deconditioning, and also get a couple potentially other forces, other people, other experiences that show us something that almost help to kind of realign us. So there's sort of like recalibrating checkpoints, I would say, when you get to that first Saturn Return. Some people, when that moment comes, will often feel a kind of support in being able to be clear about, oh yeah, I didn't want to do that program. I'm actually interested in this over here, or, I need to follow this track, over here. These are the things that I'm interested in. I just don't care what my mother thinks about that, or whatever it is. It's a chance to get this, to see the difference between the conditioning and what we are. And it's a long process. Each one of these major cycles is 7 years, so we're in them most of the time. Luckily for us, I think. So, about 3.5 years before, we'll often start to feel these major life cycles come in, and then it hits, and then we're still processing it for a few years after, and different things happen along the way. But that Saturn return, I think, is that first kind of touch from the cosmos to remind us. Then I think what can happen to a lot of us is for a lot of us, it can feel like our first kind of crossroads. And then it can be this, and I think we can often see it through the difference just on the most basic level between the open centers and the defined centers, where we have a sort of sense of, this is what I really want, but then the open centers are saying, no, you got to prove this. No, that's going to hurt somebody's feelings. No, you have to get certain about that. No, you have to make a commitment, whatever that might be. And that then can become a time that we either double down on the homogenized game, or we kind of step into, okay, maybe I'm going to experiment with my own game over here, even though it feels more insecure, even though I haven't seen anybody else do it before, even though I'm not quite sure how it's going to turn out. I think if we are able to receive that kind of recalibration, or for those of you who found human design young, in your 20s, I mean, lucky you. Then that starts to kind of set up things for the next one, because I think after we get out of the energy of that Saturn return cycle, then we can kind of like sink into sort of a groove. And for some of us, that can mean kind of falling asleep. We sort of like get pulled into the thing that we do, and now we're kind of just phoning it in a little bit until we get to the Uranus opposition. So then when the Uranus opposition comes in our early 40s, this can be one that I think, in my experience, is a little more electrical, a little more individual, can be a little more intense, or a lot more intense. It can be obviously associated with the midlife crisis. It can be the point in time where it's sort of the halftime checkpoint. It's like halftime at the Super Bowl. It's like, hey, and it's often a wake-up call for many of us to say, you're not going to live forever. You're not 22 anymore. You're not a spring chicken. You don't have your whole life ahead of you. You have maybe half of your life left if you're lucky. So again, what are you doing? What matters to you? Can you sustain this shit you've created? Can you sustain these structures that are in your life? Is this going to keep working for you?
Don't want to sustain them. I just want to dump them before that.
That's the blow it up approach to the Uranus opposition.
How we've been rolling.
I know that one. So it can be a point that is erratic in that way. It can be intense in that way. We can feel that urge to blow things up, destroy things, rearrange things. If we haven't had a real healthy relationship with our not self theme, if we haven't been able to process some of the conditioning forces we've been in, then I think it can be a more explosive time, because we get a surge of energy to be like, I'm not taking this anymore, I'm not doing this anymore. So it can certainly be intense. But it can also be a time to sort of get that nudge that helps us to put ourselves sort of back in the center of our own movie, in the center of our own life. And it often turns into something that can demand of the people around us that they accommodate us. So how, in whatever ways that we've been accommodating ourselves to the conditions we thought we had to live under, I think when the Uranus opposition comes, it can be a real support to say, no, actually, these things need to be realigned. I can't sustain these certain behaviors or relationships anymore. I can't play these certain roles anymore. Now, this is how it is. And often that can create a kind of realignment of relationship. I would say, especially if you don't have a lot of natural defined energy in your design, then I think what I've seen is that these cycles can bring, you get a non-motorized projector in one of these cycles. Not that I would know, but it can bring a surge of energy to be able to do things that you didn't have the energy to do prior. So I have a great example of that. I have a client and friend who's also a mental projector. And it's a fascinating thing to see because she has the same surface design as my sister, who is also a mental projector. They were born like a few hours apart, same day, same year, same time zone. So this mental projector has probably had a sense for many years that her marriage is over. But as many of you may know, if you're a projector, or maybe any type, it'd be very difficult to get out of a relationship that you're in, even when you know that it's over. And you may find that as painful as that can be, you're sort of sitting in something, and it's almost like you're waiting for the time. You know it's the same thing, like with the emotional, you know that it's over. Like there's often a moment. Awareness is not usually our problem, in my experience. We often know what the truth is, if we really look at it. It's about when are the conditions, when's the timing going to lay out, when am I going to have the courage to actually act on what I know is true, or when's the energy going to come in that's going to allow me to act on what I know is true. So, so this woman probably for years knew this is over. My manifesting generator husband hasn't, really engaged me or invited me to anything in 8 years. I think this is done. But she was sort of waiting, and at one point, right as her Uranus opposition is ramping up, he sits her down and he says, and this is the first time in many years that he said anything like this to her, he turns to her and he says, I think we need to talk about our relationship. And in that moment she said, I'm moving out. And he was like, what? It was like, all she needed was that moment of energy investment from him to say, I think we need to talk about our relationship. And it was just, I'm leaving.
That's good.
Wait a minute, we need to talk about this.
Yes.
It's done. It's done. It's over. And that
Over for 8 years.
that I think is my sort of analogy for that is that it's like if you've ever worn high heel shoes, and if you've been wearing high heel shoes all night at an event, if you take them off for a second, you are never going to put those shoes on. Never. It's going to hurt so bad. It's the numbness that you built up to tolerate that conditioning, that incorrect conditioning. As soon as that numbness goes away, you're not going to be able to tolerate them for a second. And then all of a sudden you have people around you being like, who are you? This is not the person I married. This is not the friend I thought I had. Where's my sister? Where's, what are you about? And it's hard. I mean, I have a lot of compassion for it. It is hard to tell the truth to people and just say, I'm sorry, it's over, It is what it is. So whether you're, I think the beauty of a generator is that the sacral center knows when it's done. That's, if you say open sacral center is not knowing when enough is enough, defined sacral center is, this is dead to me now. This is over.
What was the cross? The UO cross?
Cross is separation.
That's funny.
By the way.
P.S. So I think it can be really shocking, those moments for ourselves and for the people who love us, to realize the thing is, it's not about love. If you really look at the mechanics and you look at the Incarnation Cross and you look at the movement through these major life cycles, you'll see this is the movement of our trajectory through space and time. It's not about I don't love you anymore. It's that we do not exist in the same place and time anymore. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
So let's acknowledge it, and then we'll see. I don't know what's going to happen. Doesn't mean, it's not about love. And that's where I think Ra did such a good job of saying, relationships serve a purpose. Relationships have a timestamp. Relationships come and go. And you might find, if you look at your own Uranus opposition, if you're in that zone, you will likely see themes in there, whether it's in profiles or whether it's in gates that show up in the nodes or in the cross of your cycle return. You're probably going to notice some people are going to show up with those frequencies. So you've never had a relationship with 1-3 projector before, but there it is in your Uranus opposition, and now you meet this person, and suddenly, Uranus has that kind of shocking effect. It grabs you. You're like, now I gotta do something with this person. It's very intense. It can be, but I think a lot of what it's showing is that, for the most part, especially with how long the lifespan is now, relationships aren't here to be for all the time, forever. Most of them. I mean, really, most of them. So it's not a failure. It's not a failure to let go. It's not a failure to let things rearrange. It can be very painful and very difficult. But I think it's a natural part of the process. So then we get through that midlife point, those few years. Maybe there's some recalibration, there's some realignment. You might notice people leave your life. Some people show up, other people leave. Mm-hmm. And this is also something that I think is really valuable to let happen. Don't hold on, if you can. Don't try to force it. I think about a lot of manifestors that I've seen who go through a lot of pain around relationship and rejection, and how to deal with that. Or emotional people who've been told that they're too much, or there's been a sense of rejection around that. Or projectors have been told they're sort of like lazy and always tired, and there's a sense of rejection around that. If you reveal what you are to somebody and they leave you, good.
Yeah.
If you believe
Absolutely.
yourself and people go away, let them go. I mean, I had a reading with a Locke once, and he was like, if you are a mental projector and you are with someone and you want to change them, they're not for you. You have no energy. You're here to be on somebody else's ride. So if you don't like their ride, get off the ride. Don't try to change them.
Yeah.
If you want to change them, they're just not for you. Nothing wrong with them. Nothing wrong with you. They're just not for you. So let them go. Love them from afar. And I've learned that very deeply with people in my life who I respect, who I love, that I cannot love them up close for very long. I just can't. I can't process the energy. So I can say, yes, I can be with you. We can do this for this purpose, for this amount of time, and then I love you. Be well. See you next time. So yes. So if you reveal yourself, if you live out your nature, and things start disintegrating, that's where Adya has that great, Shanti has that great quote that, awakening is a
destructive process.
Yeah, awakening is a deconstruction project. It's not like I'm waking up to build my glorious life. It's the sleeping phoenix. I'm waking up to and when I wake up, all the shit that's not supposed to be here starts dying and going away.
Destroyer, creator.
Totally.
It's the same everywhere.
Yeah.
Who said that? I'm sorry. Waking up.
Adya.
Yeah. And it's like manure grows things, right?
right.
It's what's the waste becomes.
Right. And that's the yin and yang. It's the to everything there's a season. There's a time to create. There's a time to die. All of that stuff. So then we get through the Uranus opposition, which often has that sort of midlife checkpoint frequency to it, and that further serves, matures, teaches something, shows something to our cross, something more about our purpose, something more about our frequency. As a side note, I think that if you have a major cycle come in and the profile of that cycle is dissonant with your native profile, that can be a very interesting experience. If you're a 2-4 and you have a 3-5 Uranus opposition cycle, you might find suddenly you're bumping into stuff and having a messier process than you're used to. And it may be uncomfortable, but there's something there for you to get to see from that. And even with, just to complete that piece about the mental projector on the cross of separation, my sister, same design, same surface design, same Uranus opposition cross, she's been going through this whole transition as well. But completely different context, completely different relationships. It's much more been about separation from her birth family. It's a whole different story. So that's what's so fascinating.
Yeah.
If you were going to sit down and give them both a foundation reading and a Uranus opposition reading, you'd be talking about the same themes, same profiles, same whole movement, but the details of it for each of them and how that's going to play out in their lives, totally unique, totally different experience. So it's fascinating, and that goes into the mystery that's beyond what I could speak to. Then we get a few years respite, and then the Kiron return comes in. And, Ra described that as, first he said, we're not really grown until we're 40. So no need to be in a rush, It's just be like, cool, I'm a kid till 40, 4 more years, you can be a baby. Yeah, so, Uranus opposition is kind of like we're barely an adult. And then we got a few years to sort of like get comfortable with that, and then Chiron comes in, bringing an opportunity to let that purpose really bloom into something that can go beyond. And if you think about it, we're in the very first few generations of people who have an expectation that we're going to have a third act in life. So this is a whole new thing. I mean, just to even have the Chiron, the post-Chiron return life is a pretty new thing to get to then see, well, how do I get to function and express myself and be what I'm here to be in the world in a way that's not necessarily about survival anymore. It's not about who's going to feed the kids or how, who's going to see me or how am I going to do this or that. Then it becomes more about, there's something here to again support and realign and bring reinforcements to that expression of purpose that we're here to get to experience. But I think, to me still, and this is awesome because my nodes are in 4323, and if you listen to what Ross says about that, he'll say, you've got 4323 in your nodes, you're designed to be a freak among freaks, which often means that you end up being the more traditional one in freaky environments. And here I am, little Miss IHDS, in the freaky environment. So it's cute, right? It's fun. It's funny, you have to laugh. But I think I'm really grateful that I got to spend a lot of time early on getting really clear about mechanics and my experience of them in the body on just on that simple centers level that I really got to feel that, because I don't think I was really capable of some of the deeper levels of nuance. This is just my experience until I got straight with that. The energies were too big for me. I mean, emotional energy alone is enough for me to process, let alone I'm going into some of the deeper levels I couldn't process at that time. So even with all this information we can get, we can learn about our Incarnation Crosses, we can learn about all these cycles, we can look at all these details, we can look at all these themes, even still, if it gets overwhelming, or if we notice our minds starting to try to orchestrate things based on that knowledge or information, that's the beauty of like, oh yeah, I just relax and wait to be invited. Or I just sit and I wait until there's something worth doing with my energy. And trust, I'm going to feel that when it comes. So then we don't even have to know. And then sometimes I think that's why Ra highlighted, well, don't look at the cycle returns until you're a couple years past them. Because it probably won't make that much sense until you look back and like, oh, that's what that was. Holy shit, that's exactly that. I get it. I see what that is. I think it can be hard to connect those things to our experience before they happen. Not that I haven't thoroughly studied my own Kiron Return, which is so I get it. We can't help it.
I can't deal with a fixed, prescribed way of learning anyway.
Totally.
That somebody else prescribes to me. It's like, how can this be so mutated, but then there's one way to learn it?
Of course.
Yeah.
Which is why if somebody were to come to me like, well, should I get a foundation reading? It's like, I don't fucking know. Get one if you want. Should I look at my Uranus opposition? It's in 2 years. I don't know.
Yeah.
Is it your time? Is your time to look at your Uranus opposition? Is it your time to learn about your variable? Is it your time to learn about your social? It's your life. We have so many people in our classes who'll be like, can I blah blah blah? Can I? Da-da-da. I'm a manifestor. Can I? Do whatever the fuck you want. It's your life. I'm not in charge of your life. That's what I loved about Ra. I think Ra liberated me as a 5/1 with guilt motivation and probability, and everything's heavy and responsible and horrible. And he really liberated me. He was like, I'm not responsible for you. I'll give you this information. Good luck. You know? Whereas for me, I felt like, oh God, if I say this thing to this person, then I'm responsible to take care of them for the rest of their lives, depending on what I said. It's like, no, you're a sovereign being. And right now, we have the biggest smorgasbord of information that's ever existed until the internet dies. So have at it. and then trust yourself and do what you want, and then you'll know. You know when it's time to reel things in, or stop studying, or get some guidance, or look into something. Oh my God, I'm right. I can't say the number of times that there have been aspects of design that there were just a moment. It's like, holy shit! I have to go. I have to go look at that piece, and it's actually just the right time. I can actually digest it. I know what this means right now. Otherwise, it's just words.
Too much information.
Anyway, I think we all have the right to that. Do it your way. Do it how you want. Do what's right for you. Anyway, I think that's most of what I have to say. But I'm open to comments, questions.
I have a question. I don't know if you mentioned the general age ranges of these cycles. Can you reiterate that or iterate that?
Yeah, so Saturn Return is going to be somewhere around 28,
Yeah.
and in the 30s, Uranus Opposition is going to be somewhere around 42 to 44. Kiron Return is going to tend to be right around 49.
Okay.
So they're kind of like a good. I mean, it's exciting. I remember being like 25 and like, I can't wait till I'm 50. I just know it's going to be really good when I'm 50. But I just always had this innate sense that was going to be the best part of my life, and maybe it was just a sense of knowing it's going to, for me, that it was going to take me that long to get a hold of this whole game, get a sense of how to be in this game. So, yeah, so the Uranus Opposition Kiron Return is like a nice little 1-2 punch there. But it's a fun thing to do. I mean, if you've been through so many cycles and you look at who showed up in your life, or who became prominent in your life, or what kind of people you met during those specific times, you probably see it. You probably see it in the cycle chart. It's pretty fascinating.
So are you saying that now that I have my Kiron Return, I don't get any more gifts?
You get more.
I like the whole idea. Like
I'm
if
free
somebody-
of gifts.
Yeah, if somebody would have told me that out of nowhere something's going to shift and things are going to look different, I would have had it all. Yeah, that would have been really cool for me. Whether they shifted in a positive way, I don't even give a shit about that. But it's like getting stuck in this rut and not being able to move out of it, and blaming myself for whether it was my fault or not. It doesn't really matter. But so what I just heard is it's like I've already done that last thing. So where's the
You're free,
No,
honey.
you get
You're
your
home
Saturn
free.
return.
Yeah.
You get to
You just keep
decide.
going.
Your
Yeah.
Uranus return if you're lucky.
You keep
Make
going,
it up. How about
I
just
think-
make it up from now
Yeah,
on?
I mean, I think these are the three major checkpoints to get us to adulthood, really.
And then they recycle, like again. So what you're saying? Like
Saturn
when you say
return
I mean,
comes
just
around.
not that it's super pertinent, but does it just double? So like 28, and then what would double out to that? Like 28
There is a
plus
second
28,
Saturn.
roughly.
Second set
And
of
each
returns.
one,
Yep.
each one would be in the same number of
Yeah.
roughly.
Well, yeah. Second set of returns is going to be around 57, 58.
Uranus return
Well,
is 20.
and I
Uranus
think
returns.
too, it's like something I noticed because I always hung out with people older than me. They would say when they get to their 40s, they kind of get to this place where they sort of stop caring what people think
Right.
and speak in their mind
Yeah.
and being taken seriously. And then people would tell me the 50s to 60s were the most fruitful years of life.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I think that's what a lot of
Harvest
this
time.
is showing. It's not that we
Yeah.
can't do anything up until
no,
then, but
no.
there's a value to life experience.
Well,
They're
think
just
about
huge.
fruit trees. They have to grow for years before they produce.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
It is all the same. Nature is the best way to learn.
It's
Just
a
all
question.
right there.
just because I got deep in astrology last year, and I just am curious. In astrology, my Uranus is in Sagittarius in like the 5th house. Chiron is like in the 12th house. Does that have any correlation? I mean, obviously in human design, we're looking at the gates and all of that, but do those like, because in HD, when we're looking at, I believe, the Rave mandala or whatever, we're able to see also that those signs are in those, those
Gates.
places. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I'm just curious if, like, that kind of themes as well that play into our charts as well that unfold.
Yeah, I think they're different views of the same transit, the same cycle. Like you could look at your Uranus opposition, and you could look at through an astrological lens or the human design lens, and you can kind of see sometimes similar overlapping themes, but they can tell you different things about that time.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
I just recently, I'm kind of in my Uranus opposition, and I'm feeling it deeply. I just want to thank you for mentioning about having, like, I have only 2 centers defined. And interestingly enough, I haven't really looked at the cycle, but I was kind of prepared for it. So it was really interesting. Like, we were talking about looking at it afterwards. And I think for some people, maybe it is nice to know that just at least something's coming. Because for me, it was like I could surrender to the experience and oftentimes just drop into awareness as this crazy shit was happening. But I was like, oh, I just know I'm going to be new and shiny after this, so just go with it. But it was rather traumatic. I mean, it's still, I'm still in the ripples of it. So I just want to thank you for mentioning, especially with the person who's highly undefined. I'm also a manifester on the cross of tension.
Oh yeah.
Oh, 1-3. Okay.
Oh yeah.
The jokes don't stop. So, literally, that's me. I'm like laughing, and I'm like the drama mask. Like I'm laughing, or I'm crying, or I'm just sitting there at peace. Like it's been amazing. It's been a ride. But even looking back on the Saturn return, I didn't know human design then. Not nearly. I didn't even really know astrology. And something very fundamental happened, so I'm going to be really interested to go back and look, because I have an idea about what happened. I always told people that was when my heart got broken open. Yeah. And I'm an ego man. That's all I have. Yeah. And so now I'm starting to put the pieces together. So thank you for that pointer.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
It's reminding me of something somebody said in one of the other sessions where she said the first time, I think it was Talia, she said the first time she saw her mother's chart, she cried. Because she was just like, holy shit, I see what that is. I get it now. And that to me has been, I did a lot of psychotherapy before human design and worked in a lot of different modalities like that. There were so many things that human design reframed about my early life that I thought were really fucked up and should have been different. And it was like, oh my God, it couldn't have been another way. Like there's no choice. I get it. I get no choice. It couldn't have been another way. And I think the Saturn return can be like that. If you go back, if you're older and you go back and you look at some of those cycles, it can bring on this kind of compassion for yourself, right? Oh my God, I lived through that. Like, wow, that did do that to me. And it hurt, or it was hard, or it was shocking, but I needed that to get closer to what I'm here for.
Yeah, for sure. Like, if I were to describe myself prior to my Saturn return, I was so numb from my early life. Literally, my chart is a study in stress.
Yeah.
So I'm like mastering this frequency. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So then, I was so numbed out that having an experience with love and then having that experience break actually made me start feeling. Yeah. So then it was like, I couldn't be really angry at the experience because that experience taught me so much.
Yep.
And it taught me how to be more loving to myself.
Yes. And then also it kind of opens up this whole thing where, and I think this is another big teaching that that emotional beings have for the rest of us, is that pain is not something to be avoided. It's part of the experience, and we need that. And if you surrender to it and you go into it, like the death, whether it's the death or it's the pain or it's the melancholy, you go into it, it's like, yeah, okay, soil's getting tilled, shit's being burned to the ground. It hurts, it's hard. I don't want it to be this way, but this is how it is. And
self-love. It's just
Yeah,
a
and
self-love
acceptance.
and acceptance
It's
of all
like-
of it.
let's start at that baseline. Let's accept things as they are. Then you see if there's something you can do with it or not.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So I just had my Uranus opposition date a couple weeks ago, and I flip into gate 18 to work on what is spoiled.
Where what?
Work on what is spoiled,
Work on what is spoiled. That's a good one.
which is a very interesting thing, and I think it's also like kind of divine timing, and I'm gonna have fun watching it. That I enter the experiment right into the Uranus opposition, and I hit 7 years at Chiron Return. So those points, like to be like,
Yeah.
it's gonna be good. What a ride!
Yeah.
I would say too, I am just starting into my second Saturn, and which is a cross of unexpected.
Oh.
And I'm sitting between two gentlemen here that have the 27 and 28.
Aw,
just here.
that's so beautiful. I love it.
It's happened that way.
Yeah, it's like I don't know, energetics, mathematics, right? You know, magnetics, like just pulls us all together. It's cool, especially when we let go, right? To get out of the way, then you can sort of see this like little symphony of how everything comes together.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool.
It's nice when no choice becomes a relief rather than a death sentence.
Yeah.
It's really nice. When that flips over, it's like, oh, cool. I don't have to figure this out. I don't have to be in control. Just kind of see what happens.
Yeah.
It's actually a lot easier.
It's like the exhale.
But I think also with what you mentioned, I think that's also why there's so much emphasis in human design on paying attention to how you get into things, because it's a lot easier to not get into something than to get out of something you don't want to be in. And one thing that I would just say as an aside, especially for projectors, is I think we're really good at manipulating ourselves into situations that then we're dying to get out of. So much easier to not get into it in the first place.
There's something else that seems like I just want everybody right in this group. It's like the other day when I was in a group and I was like, I was really wanting for somebody to say, yeah, your chart kind of sucks. Just so I can say, you know, I cannot be fucking responsible for my life kind of sucking.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's like, I'm really grateful for that. So I just want all of you to know that are going to be reading charts. It's okay to say it fucking sucks.
Do you have like an individual channel or something? Because this is the second comment. Okay, so I gotta tell my little individual story. And just for a second, because this is the best individual, and I wanted to comment too, because I love that. Can we hear it? Can we hear it? Rosencrantz is the excited collective person like me who's like, Guildenstern, we're going to the new city, we're going to the new city. Guildenstern's all like individual. Rosencrantz is like, there's new food, there's gonna be new people to meet, there's new restaurants. Yeah, it's a play, it's a play or film too, but it's like a collective guy, you know. And he's like, we're gonna have all the new things, and then Guildenstern, the individual, says, but it's the same sky, Rosencrantz. You know, nothing new. It's like you're just waiting. Can't there be something else? That's what I was getting. You're like after Chiron. Well, yeah, there is. There's the greatest mystery of all. There's the Bardo after 84. So we all get the greatest mystery. Don't worry. There's always something else. As long as you're alive, there's something else. There's the Bardo state. Do you have a comment?
Don't worry, it'll be over soon.
I want to say though, Mary, I think you're bringing up something really important, because in the training that John and I did, there's a lot of emphasis on like, this is how you do your reading, this is the order you do it in, you emphasize the positive, and you start with the positive, and you know, and a lot of stuff on Instagram, very positive. But I really understand why Rob like went so hardcore after the not self, and so many people are like, he's so negative, I don't want to hear it. But to me, working with people, it's very interesting to see, and I'll feel it out with people to see what's going to light them up, what's going to reach them, because sometimes you can tell somebody about the beauty of their nature and the glory of their design, and they don't relate to it, because that's not what they've been experiencing. So if you get to, hey, look, you got a really fixed sacral center. you're really fixed. If people have said that you're difficult, you are. You are not flexible.
That's what I was told.
So that's intense. You know,
It's helpful.
it's intense, but it is what it is.
You
So
can accept it then. You
both
can
let's
very
go
fixed.
with let's see how do we go with it, you know. Or like your open ego is the bane of your existence, and you can talk about all these other details as much as you want, but that thing is still fucking you. And if you don't get that, there's no point in knowing anything else if you can't get a hold of that in your experience. So, you know, anyway, I really appreciate that. And sometimes when somebody acknowledges the pain that we're in, it does a lot more to help us release it than to just tell us how beautiful
Absolutely.
everything is.
Yeah.
When you can't experience that beauty, it's like, okay, then I'm doing something wrong because I can't experience it. Just if you say that I have, okay, great, good deal. Glad you can see it because I can't, or I can't feel it.
Yeah, and that's where it can also be really helpful when you have support in your life. People who know this well enough that they can keep feeding that to you.
Yeah, no,
that's
I've
a-
got
that's
that
a
whole thing
rich-
this weekend,
riches.
you know, or this, more than a weekend. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
where have, you know, this is the space that I need for people to help hold me in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then also to have people in your life, and I think this is what can sometimes get lost when we don't have real life embodied mentors or peers or, you know, to have people who can ask you a good question that makes you, you know, look at your shit. Or
Yeah.
like, look at where maybe, you know, something might not quite be working, you know, or you can be, when I first started, I had 2 G projectors and 1 splenic projector who are my closest friends. The 4 of us would get together and we would have a call every week and we would do retreats together and stuff. And they were the only people that I felt comfortable enough with, and I felt like they could see me enough that I could also hear honest feedback from them about something that I was missing. And I was so grateful to have those kind of relationships where they could call me on my shit and they could say, you know, you're kind of off in a thing right now. You might want to look at it. You know, so I think it's very valuable to have, but not, you know. But then that can also go to a place where you see people. It's very painful to see people using human design against each other. It's very,
That's ugly.
very
Yeah.
sad. I think so. I've seen that in a lot of relationships. It's just
That doesn't sound like fun at all.
Sounds like a nightmare.
So find that
Not a-
sweet spot, you know, the people who can love us, see us, and also, you know, help us see where we have blind spots. I think it's really valuable.
Thank you.
Can I request like any insight on information about like what Uranus as well as Chiron, like the energies behind those, I guess, cycles that go through, you know? Like I understand that it's like, I'm just curious, like what is Uranus, like what, like the energy behind that in human design, like
I
what
had
does that
a
cycle?
comment that was kind of related. I decided not to do it, but my comment was because you mentioned trauma, and in evolutionary astrology, you know, Uranus associated with trauma. I happen to know Mark Jones. He's an EA guy, and we have some like Uranus stuff going on. We talked all about it. What's interesting in human design, we don't usually use the word trauma. In fact, even the keynote given to it, the sidetrack, sounds so jolly, sounds so nice. But what it really comes down to, I mean, on the one hand, Rod said to develop a personal relationship with the planets, but also your relationship with the planets change. There's kind of the pre-mutated or pre-human design where the Mercury, Neptune, Jupiter, and Venus are the planets of choice. And then and Saturn and Pluto, kind of Uranus, Mars are all a little bit scary and all a little bit malefic is the word that the traditional 7th-century astrologers used. And you'll find Saturn and you know Uranus, 2 of these cycles are in there. Chiron's not. It's a little bit different in HD and so on. But in any case, I guess I would just say that as you decondition, you know, I do believe that your relationship to these planets changes. And like when you were talking about looking back on your Saturn, I'm like, oh yeah, like it goes from being this punishing bad thing to almost being your friend. Like you befriend Saturn, you befriend Uranus, you befriend Pluto, and you ultimately befriend Mars, which I believe, just as a side note, may even raise the body temperature and kind of make you just a little more of an energetic person overall. So,
Yeah. My additional take on them, my experience is Uranus is kind of individuating. So it's kind of like, hey, get straight. with who you are as an individual, and then Chiron is kind of a support for now. What do you have to offer? You know, what are you here to bloom into, and to heal, and to live out.
Gotcha.
You know, as an
That brings
offering.
clarity, thank you.
Yeah.
There's one more thing that I picked up around Uranus through another system where it kind of studies connections, and when there is a Uranus connection between two individuals, oftentimes they were together in another life, or they share philosophical, or sort of like there's sort of that I don't know, it's not really community, but kind of, you know what I mean? So I don't know if that plays into your understanding of it at all or not, but
Community of freaks, community of
Well,
community of
kind of like we could have all been here.
Communion of awareness.
Yeah, so philosophical alignments and things like that tend to, and also the ability to just come and go as you please, like it's complete individuation. So if you have Uranus, like we could be talking and then you could just walk off and I wouldn't care, wouldn't take it personal or think anything of it if I was receiving it well. You know, so it was association, but it was not like a bonded association, if you will, like, or an energetic connection, if you will. It was more, I think it was more towards the head, if I understood it correctly. So I don't know if that fits what you.
I don't know that I looked at that.
I do have to look with you.
Another little thing with the transit, these big life transits, it's a little different than like traditional astrology. Is that at least the way I understand it is that, you know, like in traditional astrology, it's like whatever. I think you know those transits are like a window, a very specific window. While in human design, like the Saturn Return, kind of, even though there is a concentrated period, it kind of sets the theme into your 30s. Your Uranus opposition kind of sets the theme to your 40s, and even your Chiron opposition sort of sets a general theme for the rest of your life.
That's absolutely right, and also that the Saturn theme continues with Uranus as a secondary theme. So the Saturn doesn't actually, because it's a tripartite life phase. So that Uranus colors the second half of the Saturn, while the Saturn continues.
Yes.
By the way, just I don't know if anyone has any comments on this, but I'm in a 2-4 cross of 4 ways Saturn. I'm a 5-1. I was really lucky that Ra in his life cycle analysis book did a 5-1 to a 2-4 cycle,
That was
which
my
was
Saturn return.
Malcolm X.
I'm a 5-1 with a 2-4 across the 4 ways.
Right, so if you
Saturn.
read that book, you'll see that Malcolm X had that as well.
Yes,
And so that's the example, right? And so, you know, I moved to the desert, and here we are.
All right, well, it's hot, and thank you.
Yeah, one more. This is a podcast with John. It's on iTunes, and yeah, it's.
What's the name of the podcast?